Dilshod sat on the edge of his narrow bed, the blue glow of his laptop reflecting in his tired eyes. Outside, the city was waking up slowly, vendors rolling up their shutters, distant buses groaning to life, and the early birds singing as if nothing in the world had changed. But something had. The message had come at dawn. People's artist Zukhriddin Rahmatov has passed away. At first, Dilshod didn't believe it. He clicked every link, opened every post, reread every headline as if one of them would suddenly say, "This is a mistake." But the truth stayed heavy, like a stone placed gently on his chest. He closed his laptop. The room fell into silence, the kind that makes your heartbeat sound too loud. On the small desk beside him stood a faded DVD case, Bahor Kelganda. Rahmatov's face, youthful, bright, impossibly alive, smiled from the cover. Dilshod reached for it, turning it over slowly, like he had never seen it before. He remembered being 10 years old, sitting beside his grandmother on a cotton-stuffed mattress. The house had smelled of freshly baked naan, and the old TV flickered with static until Rahmatov's image appeared. Even as a child, he had felt something stirring, something powerful and indescribable. Bunny Kaur, his grandmother had whispered. His acting, it comes from his soul. From that day on, Dilshod had carried a quiet dream, to make films that could touch hearts the way Rahmatov's performances did. Now that dream felt suddenly fragile. He stood up and walked toward the window. Tashkent's morning sun pushed through the dusty glass, illuminating particles of air like tiny golden sparks. "I wasn't ready to lose you," he whispered without realizing it. But grief wasn't the only feeling inside him. There was something else, something warm, smoldering, refusing to die down. A fire Rahmatov himself had lit years ago. Dilshod straightened his shoulders. He knew he couldn't sit still. He needed to go to the funeral. He needed to say goodbye. He needed to see, one last time, the man whose art had shaped the course of his entire life. He grabbed his jacket, wiped his eyes with his sleeve, and stepped out into the world, a world that suddenly felt dimmer, yet filled with a light that refused to go out. The funeral hall stood like a silent fortress, its wide doors open to the sea of people flowing inside. The air carried a mixture of white roses, cold marble, and the quiet ache of thousands of hearts beating with the same sorrow. Even from outside, Dilshod could hear the low murmur of voices, respectful, trembling, full of disbelief that such a towering figure was now gone. He stepped through the entrance and felt an immediate shift, as if the building itself were holding its breath. Inside, portraits of Zukhriddin Rahmatov lined the walls, him in his youth, with the fierce eyes of a dreamer, him in his middle years, carrying the weight and wisdom of countless roles, him in his final era, still dignified, still glowing with the unmistakable warmth that had captivated generations. People moved slowly, almost reverently. Some held flowers pressed close to their chests. Some wiped tears before they even reached the coffin. And others simply stood frozen, unable to believe that the man who had seemed so immortal on screen could be lying still, silent. Dilshod's throat tightened. A group of elderly artists gathered near the front, whispering memories to each other, tales of rehearsals, tours, laughter in backstage rooms, moments that would now only live in stories. One of them, a woman with silver hair and a voice cracked from age and emotion, whispered, "He carried the heart of Uzbekistan in his voice." Another nodded, adding, "And when he stepped on stage, everyone else disappeared." Dilshod felt like an intruder among giants. These were people who had lived with Rahmatov's brilliance up close. He had only admired from afar. But as he slowly moved forward, following the line toward the coffin, he noticed something unexpected: young faces. Many of them, actors in their 20s and 30s, filmmakers, students, stage amateurs. They stood shoulder to shoulder with elders, their grief just as raw. Rahmatov had touched them too. When Dilshod finally reached the front, he froze. There it was, the national flag draped gently over the casket, the red, green, and white shimmering under the soft lights. A wreath of white lilies rested carefully beside it. Above, a large screen played clips from his films, emotional monologues, brave declarations, quiet smiles that broke hearts with their sincerity. A scene from Bahor Kelganda appeared, the very movie that had changed Dilshod's life. Rahmatov, in character, whispered softly on screen, "Even when winter takes everything, the heart remembers spring." Dilshod felt tears spill down his face. He didn't wipe them away. He stepped closer and placed his trembling hand briefly on the edge of the casket, not touching, just hovering, as if afraid to disturb the stillness. "I owe you everything," he murmured under his breath. "Everything." As he stepped back, unsure what to do next, an elderly man approached him. His walk was slow, deliberate. His eyes, though tired, seemed to hold decades of unspoken stories. "You're Dilshod, aren't you?" the man asked quietly. Dilshod blinked in confusion. "Yes, but how did you?" The man rested a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Zukhriddin told me about you. About your dreams. About your passion." Dilshod's breath caught. His world seemed to tilt. "He believed in you," the man continued softly. "He said your fire reminded him of himself, long ago." Dilshod felt the ground beneath him shift, grief mixing with shock, pain blending with a sudden, overwhelming sense of responsibility. Someone like Rahmatov noticing him, believing in him, it felt unreal. The elderly man nodded toward the coffin. "Don't let his light fade, son. Let it burn through you." Dilshod swallowed hard. He had come to say goodbye. But now, he realized, he had also come to receive something, a torch, passed silently from one generation to the next. And in the middle of all the tears, the flowers, the songs of mourning, a new purpose began burning in Dilshod's heart. Dilshod stepped out of the funeral hall and into the crisp afternoon air, but the world outside felt strangely muted, as if the city had lowered its voice in respect. The crowd behind him continued to move in waves, people entering and leaving with the same quiet heaviness, like a heart beating in slow, mournful rhythm. He clutched the leather notebook the elderly man had given him. It felt heavier than it looked, as if the entire weight of Rahmatov's legacy rested inside. He didn't open it yet. He was almost afraid to. Instead, he walked aimlessly through the park beside the hall, the same park where artists, students, and families often gathered on bright days. But today, even the pigeons seemed subdued, their wings beating gently instead of their usual excited flutters. Dilshod found an empty bench and sat down. For a moment, he simply stared at his hands, still trembling slightly. He replayed the funeral in his mind, the tributes, the faces streaked with tears, the national flag over the coffin, the lines of Rahmatov's film echoing again and again. But what echoed the loudest was the elderly man's voice. "He believed in you." Dilshod inhaled shakily. No one had ever said that to him before. Not with such certainty. Not with such meaning. When he finally gathered enough courage, he opened the notebook. The first page contained Rahmatov's handwriting, bold, firm, unmistakably his. "Art is not talent. Art is responsibility." Dilshod's chest tightened. He flipped the pages slowly, discovering a treasure trove of thoughts. Rough sketches for roles never performed. Dialogue fragments filled with raw emotion. Reflections about the state of Uzbek cinema. Notes on authenticity, truth, and vulnerability. Personal messages to young artists he hoped to mentor one day. Every page felt alive. Some had ink smudges, as if Rahmatov had paused mid-thought. Some had lines crossed out stubbornly. Some had short, perfect sentences that struck straight into the soul. Then he reached a page near the middle, one with a short paragraph that looked different. It began with a name. Dilshod. His breath hitched. He read every word slowly, carefully, afraid to blink. "I saw something in you, that hunger, that spark. Don't let the world tame it. If you lose your fire, you lose your voice. And Uzbekistan needs voices that dare to burn." Dilshod felt his eyes sting again. Rahmatov had written this. For him. Not in passing, not casually, but with intention. He closed the notebook gently, pressing his palm against the cover as if sealing a promise. The late afternoon sun began dipping behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, colors that looked like Rahmatov's warmth, his presence, his light. Dilshod stood up slowly. Everything inside him felt different now. Grief still sat heavy in his chest, but beneath it, stronger than before, something else thrived, a determination that felt almost sacred. He walked out of the park with steady steps. He wasn't just a young filmmaker anymore. He was the bearer of a torch passed down by the very man who had shaped his dreams. And as he disappeared into the dusk, the city's evening lights flickered on, tiny glowing reminders that even when darkness comes, light always finds a way to remain. Dilshod spent the rest of the evening wandering through the city as if rediscovering it through someone else's eyes, through Rahmatov's eyes. Every street felt like a memory. Every corner held a possible story. Every passerby looked like a character waiting to be brought to life. But beneath that strange inspiration was something deeper, a quiet fear. Could he really carry a legacy like that? By the time he reached his small apartment, night had already settled over Tashkent. The city glowed with scattered lights, windows lit from within, passing cars slicing through the darkness, and the faint golden shimmer of tea houses still open. He unlocked the door, slipped inside, and immediately felt the stillness of the room, a sharp contrast to the noise in his thoughts. He placed the leather notebook gently on his desk as if it were a sacred object. Then he sat down and stared at it, hands resting on his knees, breathing slowly. He opened the notebook again, picking up where he left off. The next pages were filled with Rahmatov's reflections, but these were different. More personal, more vulnerable. People think applause is what keeps us alive. They're wrong. What keeps us alive is truth. Dilshod ran his fingers lightly across the ink, feeling the depth behind each stroke. He turned another page. This one contained a short dialogue between two unnamed characters, emotional, raw, unfinished. Then another page, a monologue about loss, written so powerfully that Dilshod felt goosebumps rise across his arms. He began reading aloud, softly. When a great light dies, the world becomes darker. But only for a moment. Because the light we lose becomes the light we carry. His voice cracked by the final line. He shut the notebook, pressing it to his chest. "I'm not ready," he whispered. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from Kamola, his closest friend and a cinematography student. They had made dozens of short films together, rough, experimental, sometimes terrible, but always full of heart. Her message was simple. "I saw the news. Are you okay?" He stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. "I don't know. I feel like something changed today." Kamola responded almost instantly. "Change is good. Even painful change. Come online. Let's talk." He hesitated, then placed his phone aside. He needed silence right now, not conversation. Another hour passed. The room filled with shadows and the faint sounds of traffic drifting through the window. Dilshod leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes helplessly. But then, he remembered the elderly man's words. "Don't let his light fade, son." The sentence struck him like a spark. He sat up straighter. He pulled his laptop closer. He opened a blank document. For a moment, the screen glared back at him, empty, expectant. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. He thought of Rahmatov, his passion, his truth, his unspoken message to him, "Don't lose your fire." And suddenly, something inside him clicked. Dilshod began typing, slowly at first, then faster, then with a rhythm and intensity he had never felt before. Scenes unfolded, lines of dialogue poured out. Emotions he had buried for years rose to the surface and transformed into words. He wasn't just writing a screenplay. He was writing a tribute. A promise. A continuation. Hours passed without him noticing. He didn't drink water. He didn't move. He didn't blink except when tears blurred his vision. By the time he finally stopped, exhausted, his document was already 20 pages long. He leaned back, breathing heavily, heart pounding. He had no idea if it was good. But for the first time in his life, he felt something unmistakable. He felt connected, not just to his dream, but to the man whose shadow he had admired since childhood. He looked at the notebook again. At the worn leather. At the handwritten wisdom inside. And he whispered, voice filled with gratitude, "I won't let your light go out." The next morning, sunlight crept into the apartment, slipping between the curtains and spreading across the desk where both the laptop and Rahmatov's notebook lay open, evidence of last night's feverish writing. Dilshod hadn't slept properly. He had drifted off in his chair sometime before dawn, head resting against his arm, but despite the exhaustion, he woke with a feeling he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. He rubbed his eyes and stretched, bones cracking softly. The city outside was already buzzing, children heading to school, shop owners setting out their merchandise, the faint honk of distant traffic. Life was moving forward, even in the shadow of loss. Dilshod stood, walked to the kitchen, poured himself a cup of lukewarm tea, and returned to his desk. He stared at the pages he had written. In the morning light, they looked different, clearer, more real, almost as if Rahmatov himself had guided his hands. He reread a few lines. Some made him smile, some made him frown, but all of them felt alive. He flipped open the leather notebook again to the last section. There was one more passage he hadn't seen last night, written in slightly shakier handwriting, as if Rahmatov had penned it late at night when tired but still burning with ideas. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. Legacy is who rises because of you. Dilshod exhaled, deeply. He realized that his grief was evolving. It no longer felt like a weight crushing his chest. It felt like a hand on his back, pushing him gently forward. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He blinked in surprise. No one ever visited him this early. Opening the door, he found Kamola. Standing there, her hair tied loosely, a camera bag over her shoulder. Her eyes were tired but warm, filled with the kind of concern only true friends carried. "I figured you wouldn't answer your phone," she said with a small, knowing smile. Dilshod stepped aside. "Come in." She entered, looking around the room. Her gaze immediately fell on the notebook and the laptop screen still showing the partially written script. "You started something," she observed, walking closer. I think so," he replied softly. Kamola studied the pages. "Is it about him?" Dilshod nodded, unable to speak. Her expression softened. "You should finish it. And when you're ready, we'll film it." He stared at her, surprised. Of course we," she replied firmly. "He inspired you. And you inspire me. That's how these things work." For a moment, Dilshod felt his throat tighten. He wasn't alone in this. He had support. He had someone who understood. Kamola placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "He would have wanted you to keep creating." Dilshod looked back at the notebook, its pages shimmering in the sunlight. "Then I will," he said quietly. Days turned into weeks. The script grew. Scenes sharpened. Emotions deepened. Kamola provided input, encouragement, and sometimes tough criticism. Together, they worked late into nights, fueled by tea, passion, and the quiet echo of Rahmatov's words. And when the final page was written, when the story felt complete, honest, and worthy, Dilshod held the printed script in both hands, trembling slightly. "This is for him," he whispered. Months later, at a small industry showcase event in Tashkent, Dilshod stood nervously backstage as his short film began to play on the big screen for the first time. Kamola squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. On-screen, Rahmatov's voice, preserved from old interviews and clips, intertwined with the story Dilshod had written, blending past and present, memory and new beginnings. When the credits rolled, the room fell silent. Then applause began, soft at first, then louder, then rising in a wave that washed over him like light. People stood. Some wiped tears. Some whispered Rahmatov's name. And in that moment, Dilshod felt something he would never forget. Rahmatov's light hadn't faded. It had simply transformed, passing through him, through Kamola, through every person who had been touched by his art. Uzbekistan still glowed, not because a star had died, but because its fire lived on in every heart willing to carry it forward. Dilshod closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of applause, the weight of legacy, and the unmistakable truth. This was only the beginning.